Alrighty, good morning everyone. I finally had the double espresso outside, so I'm ready to go. Thank you everyone for making the incredibly long journey from wherever in the world to be here. I'm Nabil. I've been at Status for, working with Status for the past 4 months, and it's incredible to see how many people in this room. I can't imagine how Carl, Jarrad, Andre, Roman, the OG team are feeling to see this incredible, the number of people who are here working on this project. It's going to be a really fun and interesting 2 days. Hopefully people are already starting to get to know each other, recognizing profile pictures, putting those to how tall people are, which is the first thing you notice. We have people who are joining us from, I didn't remember to dedupe the number of countries, but a lot of countries. You can see here on the map, pretty much have entire continents covered. It's also lucky that Russia is a very large country. It makes it seem really, and yeah, we're all in this little red corner of the world. So I think the longest person has come from deep in the jungle of Brazil, and it was like a 40-something hour flight. So yeah, kudos to Ricardo. I know. As well, so this makes it even easier to end. Actually, now that we're in person, you can't do this over VC. Maybe the 11 or however many want to stand up, just to be like, and then we can be like, oh, hi, you're new. All right, cool. Awesome. All right, so before we get into the day's festivities, I thought because it's super early here in Bangkok, we thought we'd get started with some trivia. And if you're responsible for dealing with these numbers, then don't say the answer. Otherwise, it's unfair. But we'll start off with the number of languages that are supported in the Status IAM GitHub repo. Any guesses as to how many languages we have in all the repos? No. Anyone? 12? Higher. What? Lower. Lower. That's much lower. We have 15. There's a lot of different versions of C, surprisingly. So that's, yeah. All right, next is the number of Twitter followers. You can't answer. Sorry? No. Thanks, person who deals with marketing. Yes, it's 90,000. Good. You know your numbers. All right, this is a very tricky one. The number of closed issues in the Status React repo. So this is of all time. So I think the React repo started about in April of last year. So how many? Ballpark. Higher. Higher than 1,500. Sorry? Higher. Oh, that's good. That's a good sign. Higher. 3,000. 3,000. Yeah, just almost 3,000. That was as of yesterday and the day before and the day before. I don't know why it's just all of a sudden stopped, but all right, and then finally, how many people have signed up for early access to the Status Alpha? You guys underestimate the strength of the marketing team. 73,000. Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, how many actively use? I mean, if all 73,000 were using Whisper V6. Anyway, all right. Let's not get into that. So we have a very action-packed 2 days. This morning we'll be going through the long-term vision for 2018, as well as having 3 kind of lightning talks on different topics. In the later morning, we'll be going through kind of planning for Q2, and that session will come later. Tomorrow morning, we have more kind of 2018 goals and visions, a lot of it based on what happens with everyone here today. And then I think we have 7 lightning talks. So it's a lot of, it adds up to be quite the long storm. All right. In both afternoons, we have Unconference style, which is basically, actually we'll get into it, but it's very unstructured. People form into groups, tackle specific topics, and it all happens organically. For people who want a detailed agenda, there's a bit.ly link that just opens a spreadsheet, so you may find the agenda changing live. But yeah, if anyone is interested. To my left, there is the Net Explo Award for Status that Status received about a month ago. It was from a division of UNESCO, basically recognizing technological achievements, and it was, you know, the people who gave the award saw the potential that Status has for basically changing the way people interact, how people operate, and you know, it's very heavy. If anyone wants to come later and hold it, and yeah, it's a testament to the work that the Status team has been kind of driving towards. And on that, I'll hand it over to Jarrad to kind of go through what the next 5 years looks like.
What? Testing, hello? Yeah, so like Nabil kind of said, well, I don't know how Carl and myself and, you know, the OG sort of team feels like. And it's a really interesting question because I haven't really processed that. So I guess like when we started, it's just like a really crazy idea. And it's kind of funny because like you question yourself a lot and you're like, okay, these are like some really interesting ideas, but are they based in reality or is it completely delusional? And we've done really well. Like I think we've had a really great reception from the greater community. Ethereum has seen some massive success from this sort of really weird corner of society, really. Like some of the original people are very unique characters. So I'm a little bit suspicious of all of you being here today, actually. I think either you've accepted and chosen to work on something really amazing, or maybe you have no idea what you're actually doing. So I guess, where's this clicker? Yeah. All right. I'll just do that. So I guess today, like, while I have you all in the same room, I kind of want to put us all on the same page. Maybe give some more background and context to what we're doing. Also, it'll be like the first time I'm expressing some of the more deeper and darker ideas, maybe, that I haven't had the chance to fully articulate. So please bear with me if I stumble through it, because I haven't had much practice with it either. So just last month, we lost a great... So I wanted to start off by reading his declaration of the independence of cyberspace. It's long. Well, it's not long, it's 2 pages, but I'll try not to bore everyone. So governments of the industrial world, you weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past, oh my God, to leave us alone. You are not welcome amongst us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. We have no elected government, nor are we likely to have one. So I address you with no greater authority than which liberty itself always speaks. I declare the global social space we are building to be naturally independent of the tyrannies you seek to impose on us. You have no moral right to rule us, nor do you possess any methods of enforcement we have true reason to fear. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. You have neither solicited nor received ours. We did not invite you. You do not know us, nor do you know our world. Cyberspace does not lie within your borders. Do not think that you can build it as if though it was a public construction project. You cannot. It is an act of nature and it grows itself through our collective actions. You have not engaged in our great and gathering conversation, nor did you create the wealth of our marketplaces. You do not know our culture, our ethics, our unwritten codes that already provide our society more order than could be obtained by any of your impositions. You claim there are problems amongst us that you need to solve. You claim this is an excuse to invade our precincts. Many of these problems don't exist. Where there are real conflicts, where there are wrongs, we'll identify with them and address them by our own means. We are forming our own social contract. The governance will arise according to the conditions of our world, not yours. Our world is different. Cyberspace consists on transactions, relationships, and thought itself, arrayed like a standing wave on the web of our communications. It is our world that is both everywhere and nowhere, but is not where our bodies live. We are creating a world that all may enter without privilege or prejudice according by race, economic power, military force, or station of birth. We are creating a world where anyone, anywhere, may express his or her beliefs, no matter how singular, without fear of being coerced into silence or conformity. Your legal concepts of property, expression, identity, movement, and context do not apply to us. They are all based on matter, and there is no matter here. Our identities have no bodies, so, unlike you, we cannot obtain order by physical coercion. We believe that from ethics, enlightened self-interest, and the Commonwealth, our governance will emerge. Our identities may be distributed across many of your jurisdictions. All our constituent cultures will generally recognize the golden rule. We hope we'll be able to build our particular solutions on that basis, but we cannot accept the solutions you're attempting to oppose. In the United States, we have today created a law, the Telecommunications Reform Act, which repudiates your own constitution and insults the dreams of Jefferson, Washington, Mill, Madison, de Tocqueville, and Brandeis. These dreams must now be born anew in us. You are terrified of your own children, since they are natives of a world in which you will always be immigrants. Because you fear them, you entrust your bureaucracies with the parental responsibilities you are too cowardly to confront yourselves. In our world, all the sentiments and expressions of humanity, from debasing to the angelic, are parts of a seamless whole, the global conversation of bits. We cannot separate the air that chokes from the air in which wings beat. In China, Germany, France, Russia, Singapore, Italy, and the United States, you are trying to ward off the virus of liberty by erecting guard posts at the frontiers of cyberspace. These may keep out the contagion for a small time, but they will not work in a world that is soon to be blanketed with bit-bearing media. Your increasingly obsolete information industries will perpetuate themselves by proposing laws in America and elsewhere that claim to own speech itself through the world. These laws would declare ideas to be another industrial product, no more noble than pig iron. In our world, whatever the human mind may create can be reproduced and distributed infinitely at no cost. The global conveyance of thought no longer requires your factories to accomplish. These increasingly hostile and colonial measures place us in the same position as those lovers of freedom and self-determination who had to reject the authorities of the distant, uninformed powers. We must declare our virtual selves immune to your sovereignty, even as we continue to consent to your rule over our bodies. We will spread ourselves across the planet so no one can arrest our thoughts. We will create a civilization of mind in cyberspace. May it be more humane and fair than the world of your governments have made before it. So, this was like 2 decades ago. And it's interesting to think about the term cyberspace. Like, we don't really use that. In fact, it sounds a little too geeky, if we're honest. But, and so we use this term called the internet. But I think there's a qualitative difference between two of those terms. The internet doesn't really capture that what we've created and what we use on a daily basis, what's in your pockets right now, and what is streaming through this camera over there, is actually a physical domain. Well, it's a spatial domain. And this is a spatial domain that can be occupied by minds. And it's the minds of all of us together, our collective conscious. And I think that's really important to capture that at least, or at least keep it in mind when we're building things. Because it is really like a space, and it is non-jurisdictional. And even though that was very emotionally charged and probably a little heated from sort of the pragmatic days that we live in, there's some really good thoughts in there. So with that in mind, and this sort of idea of declaring independence of cyberspace, it's almost kind of like you are setting up a jurisdiction or creating a new village or city or nation state in this distant land. And many of us here today can be considered to be almost pilgrims on some kind of journey to a distant land to set up a new village in this new foreign place. And so I guess Carl and I, we had encoded a sort of secret saying into the word status, which was the state of us. I've expressed that to some people individually, but never like this. So holding like a network token, the status network token, is something like your passport or your citizenship into this new realm, into this new state, this state of us that we're building together. But before we start looking forward, I guess it's kind of a good idea to actually look a little bit backward and get some kind of context on this. So in the late 80s, there was basically 3 guys that got together, mathematicians and computer scientists, and really wanted to address some of the problems that they were seeing in computer science. And back then, like cryptography wasn't really for the common man. And so they got together 20 of their friends and basically started a Cypherpunk movement. And the idea behind this is essentially that you can use privacy-related technologies and cryptography to actually create social and political change. And I think it's in our daily lives when we're building these sort of things, it's really easy to forget this sort of stuff, and it's almost like a whisper where you not even really hear it. It's really the first time that we can give ourselves rights, and this is a right of free speech, and more importantly, it's not about secrecy. It's more about you being able to elect who you want to be privy to your information. And no amounts of physical coercion can really stop you from making that ultimate, from having that ultimate decision on who you share that information with. So, like this sort of blockchain technology, it really all comes from this kind of thought originally. You know, there's a mix of sort of libertarian ideas in there and some economics as well, and it's a bit of game theory nowadays. But bringing cryptography to all of us, to the individual, is a phenomenal achievement. And they gave rise to things like Hashcash, which is a precursor to Bitcoin. So it's very important that I think that all of us at least carry some of this spirit individually. Maybe just have a, Google it, spend some time reading about it. There's some interesting literature out there. So yeah. So I guess where are we like now? Like, I mean, just a quick nod to the past. We can like kind of look where we are at the moment. We've seen the success of Bitcoin, which has a much sort of stronger crypto-anarchist leanings. Definitely very, very important way of thinking. But we are now in a position where some of these base layers or fundamental technologies and core ideas of not only creating, using these sort of cypherpunk principles to create sort of a base foundation of order, but we can also do it in a trustless and hostile environment thanks to cryptography and peer-to-peer technologies. And then like right now, we all of the pieces, all the moving parts that these visionaries from 20 years ago had envisioned, they all exist here today. So in many ways, it's our job to take those things and put them together and then bring that to the rest of the world. And we're now seeing that today as all of these technologies are starting to move further and further into the mainstream. And we'll be continuing to do that, hopefully. But to really think about what the future looks like, we need to look at other aspects of the world. We need to look at these sort of global megatrends. These are essentially trends that have been recognized that are happening like everywhere in the world, regardless of their particular political or socioeconomic climates. So the first megatrend is urbanization. We are now getting to the size of cities that are larger than the population of Australia, which for me, as being Australian, is mind-blowing. Especially, I mean, I come from Perth, which is like the most isolated city in the world, and it wouldn't exist if there was no mining, so that's kind of funny. And of course, these mega cities, they are starting to sprawl out and touch each other, which is creating mega regions. And of course, we have mega corridors, which are supply chains that are connecting them. China has a very large initiative. I forget the name of it. One Road, one something. It's basically Silk Road 2.0, and it's you go Google it. It's just incredible. It's just mind-blowing how many people and how much assets will be flowing through this thing, and how much economic progress this will create. And another thing that I think everyone here is very familiar with, it's digitization. Pretty much everything in our lives is becoming more and more datafied. And I think it's really, really interesting. It's kind of like the internet is getting digital representations of the real world. And that's kind of concerning. Like, the other night we had a discussion about Alexa and products like this. There's definitely one side of this is quite beneficial. Like you can see how the digital world. Oh, the digital. Whoa. Have I just been talking like this the whole time? Okay. Oh, right. Okay. So, what was I saying? Datification. Something about that. Yeah. So, yeah, Alexa. So yeah, basically, all of this data is so the digital world is getting digital representations of the real world, and what that means is that there's a blurring distinction between the real world and the digital world. And I think that's really fascinating. And probably within 10 years to maybe even 15 years' time, our personal computing devices, which are currently smartphones, will be more representative of mixed reality devices and the ways of viewing both of these worlds. And as a result of this datification, I think many people, especially post-Snowden, are becoming much more aware of how this information can be used against us. And so we are now adopting a climate of transparency. I'm not sure about this last bit in terms of displaying high standards of integrity and sincerity. If you look at the US, but it's getting there. Another large trend is geosocialization. I think Ethereum at larger and even in this room is a great example of this. In fact, this is the first time I've even met many of you physically, which is just crazy. And you wouldn't be able to do that with hyperconnectedness. But with that also becomes more individuality, mostly because we are, is it Dunbar's number that we're bound to in terms of our capacity for the human mind to hold social relationships? I think it's like 150 or something like this. But we have to scale beyond that. And we're living in these mega cities where you don't even know some of your neighbors. So in many ways, we're becoming hyper-connected, but at the same time, we're also learning to be more expressive and individualistic and not being as bound to moral obligations maybe not necessarily in the physical world. There is also another trend of returning to personal accountability, which is a result of this. On a more broader scale, I think there's this idea that a good state really comes from good individuals. So it's kind of interesting that there's smarter people than me that have actually looked into this and see this as a trend that's happening. So AI has been a promised field for a long time now, but it's certainly making its progress. And with the increasing datafication, we are producing more and more data every second. And really, we need ways of coping with this, ways of extracting valuable and useful information out of it. And AI is probably our closest answer to that. But more importantly, is we're also automating away a lot of the more mundane tasks and freeing up human minds from doing some mundane things. What the effects of that are is a bit hard to tell at the moment, but it's definitely happening. So it's definitely good to be mindful of these sort of things. But more importantly, it's also giving rise to sharing economy or gig economy and machine economies in the future. And something like a public programmable blockchain doesn't make a distinction between a human or a machine. At the end of the day, we're all just addresses, and we can sign stuff with our keys. So right now, today, we have things like ride sharing, where you can call somebody who wants to offer their car services to get you from A to B. With self-driving cars, and that will become a bit more automated. And then you can imagine in the near future that a car itself could be represented by a smart contract on a public blockchain. And in this world, they would actually be self-owned. They would probably be driving around to earn their ability to repair themselves, for example. And where that goes is also very interesting. We'll probably have to start thinking about machine rights. So that's a thing that's going to be happening, soon, like within the next decade or two. So we've got this crazy sort of future that we're going into. It's like this mega city. There's AI everywhere. Everyone has like a gig, and then there's machines that are working as well for themselves. And they're all like, basically these cities are getting smarter. All of our home is getting smarter. All these devices are coming online. But the IoT industry has a massive problem with how things are structured today. In fact, most of these devices are phoning home on a consistent basis. And sorry to rag on Alexa, but you pull up some of the news around that, and it's kind of interesting to see. I think just recently, Alexa's been laughing at people, like kind of randomly, which is interesting. That's a little concerning. But these companies are now becoming giant piñatas. I mean, their security model is basically a very strong wall and distinction between the external world and their sort of internal organization. And that's not something that can operate in a hostile environment, potentially. So you can imagine it's only going to take one very talented individual who's probably bored some weekend night and decides to get access to entire networks of devices. It's very scary. But something like peer-to-peer technologies and programmable blockchains can offer a potential solution to these kinds of problems. Another thing that's happening is we're seeing a reverse brain drain. Many other countries that haven't been considered to be sort of first world or fully developed countries have been sending a lot of their youth to get educated and to learn about how to build things and understand new ideas. And now we're seeing all of those people starting to move back, which is really, really fascinating. So we're going to see a lot of the Brazil, Russia, India, China really going to come online and really be new forces within the coming decades. So that's just something to take note of. So these are all sort of physical manifestations of a more broader trend. And this is the reduction of transaction costs. And when I'm talking about transaction costs, this isn't like paying for fee or paying tax or something, although that is an element of it. When we're talking about transaction costs, we're talking about the sort of more economic abstraction of this. So it's things like filling out forms, checking in at a hotel, waiting in line to get on an airplane, for example. All of these things are consuming time and require your physical presence for that. So you can see, like in megacities, we're compressing ourselves into a physical space so we can do more faster. Our internet is getting more and more pervasive because it basically gives us frictionless ways of communication. We're seeing, like, again, in education, the more and more people are educated and have better ideas about things, there is less mental load. We can spread that mental load over more people. So this is all about transaction costs are getting lower. And this is really important to get because it's kind of like going from like Newtonian physics to like quantum physics. Things are going to get really, really nutty the more and more this gets cheaper. And it also makes it very easier for developing countries to move up faster as well, and even sidestep large portions of what developed world has actually had to build out to get there here as well. Another thing that's going to be happening over the next decade is that we internet kids are going to be inheriting the world. I think 2020 is when it's expected that we will be in the majority, or the 50% or 51% of the workforce, and then that will continue over the next decade. So we're not talking about people who aren't aware of the internet. You know, there's people who have grown up with it now, and people who understand these sort of things. So I think that's quite interesting. Also, you know, nearly 40% of these people are in India and China as well. So it's definitely something to take note of. I mean, yeah, the older generations are living longer as well. But so, I mean, if these internet kids are inheriting the world, it's kind of important to see what their worldview is like and what they are thinking about in terms of problems. Some of them aren't really immediately applicable to us. You know, climate change and destruction of nature, kind of a big deal since, you know, we've only got one place to really live in at the moment. You know, hopefully our boy Musk will get us to Mars, but you know, we think that's kind of important. The ones in white here, I think, are somewhat related to what we're doing. The other ones in sort of the darker purple, I'm not sure we can really have much influence over. The other thing is large-scale conflict or wars. That's a problem. I guess my thoughts on that are like wars are going to become more economic in nature. Because they have, or they're cheaper to do, transaction costs, and they can be more devastating. But I think it's really important to note that I actually meant to have those first two switched around, by the way. So sorry for that. But I think it's very important that public blockchains can operate in these environments, and they can because they operate in hostile environments, which means that we can protect individuals' assets. Now, of course, there are other projects out there which have very strong identities built into them and centralization that are attached to those identities, which creates a very dystopic future. So let's make sure we don't build that and build something that identities are something that the individual can control. You know, inequality in terms of income and distribution, I think that's always a problem. You know, poverty is another one. But again, you know, like as more of these developing countries become more and more economically prosperous, that'll probably go down. Religious conflicts. Again, this accountability and transparency and corruption. This is one of the fundamental things that I think blockchains can really help with. At least having a permanent record of things, and we probably won't see as much book burning anymore as well, which is kind of cool. Food and water, lack of education, safety, security, well-being, and lack of opportunity and unemployment. So it's just really important to just kind of think about what we're thinking about, I guess, and just keep that in mind. So yeah, like I think, you know, there's a lot of ideas there. There's a lot of problems there. But if you think about that as a trend in like a river and flowing down it, I think a programmable public blockchain such as Ethereum is a great raft or a great boat to be sitting in. It can connect to many of those aspects, and it can provide real potential solutions. It's still yet to be seen whether it will be actually that case or how it needs to adapt. But we as humans haven't created such an interesting trust artifact that can handle these problems before. So it's definitely worth taking note of. So I guess many of us think that we're building like an application, but we're also building an organization around that can build the application. And how we design this organization is fundamentally important. Again, if you're taking this idea of creating this sort of village in cyberspace, you want to make sure, and you want to stay away from some of the previous models of how things have been done. It's very important for us to get this right. There's been this concept of a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. There's been there's been one or two spectacular failures of this, basically running too fast to the ideal. So in many ways, what we're trying to do is an iterative step towards this, where we're working with ideas and swarms at the moment, and trying to disconnect people from ideas, and also get closer to the sort of gig style of things where you really get to have a sense of autonomy and self-directedness and how you want to operate in the pursuit of our goals. So that's also really interesting when we start to think about how we can start including the greater community, people who want to contribute and be part of what we're doing, but don't necessarily have the time or skill set to directly be involved. And that's really what the Status Network is all about. They can get involved in this. So as we figure out what works for us on a smaller scale while thinking about how this works on a larger scale and how we can almost extract ourselves away from that structure and allow it to exist and perpetuate itself without us. If we can achieve that, that'll be great. And this iterative cycle is really about ascending into the blockchain, in which we become an entity that is non-jurisdictional and doesn't exist everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So, again, I think when you look at status at face value, it looks like a messenger. I mean, when we started, it was a mobile browser, but it became a messenger because that is the best form factor for retention, as well as just that's how people use their phones, right? So we really wanted to maximize the surface area of Ethereum and also status. But if you keep in mind all of those sort of mega trends, this starts to make a little more sense. Like we think about operating systems in terms of our operating system for our computer, but if you imagine that this real world is now becoming more datafied and we're creating digital representations of those objects, we need an operating system that can handle those objects and can actually use that. If you think about the hyper-connectedness or this geo-socialization, that's where this messaging component comes in. When you're dealing with smart contracts, and contracts in general, no contract can really exist without a meeting of the minds beforehand. So there's communication that's involved before you can make agreements. So it's really important to think about when we're designing status, it's not a messenger, it's a window manager, an operating system that allows humans to interface with this really interesting architecture. So just keep that in mind. The other aspect of this is Status is an open source project. In many ways, we've found another business model for open source, which is the tokenization, allowing us to have our contributors contribute whatever they can in whatever form they can. But it's really important that we develop a loop that allows us to use status to actually build status. So like our swarms and our conversations should be happening through status. Our ability to vote on open bounties should be happening through status. To find bugs and comment on them, it should be happening through status. And when we start doing that, we can also start getting the community involved. In fact, there's some new ideas that have been talked about in the past couple of weeks about giving free S&T to new installs but this S&T is actually bound to open bounties. So everyone who actually uses it can directly contribute funds to the development of what they're seeing. So that's really important to keep in mind as well. Yeah, okay. It's hard. Like, it's really hard. You know, and I mean, I'm really amazed that all of you are here and working on this. Like, peer-to-peer apps are hard. They're so hard. Like, you know, I mean, Skype did it once. They had a hybrid peer-to-peer model, and you know, they're not anymore. Thanks, Microsoft. But you know, like, so it's doable. But also keep in mind, I think everyone should be giving a little pat to themselves on the back for even attempting to do this, because there isn't really many peer-to-peer applications, certainly not as beautiful and certainly not as consistent as what we're trying to do. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about this sort of cypherpunk stuff. We're talking about decentralization, and there's some like people I know from like the early OG Ethereum days that were very, you know, decentralization focused, but they've all given up in a little bit, you know. Like, you know, there's this whole like, I mean, there's a scaling now movement, which is great. Like, I think it's a necessary step because they want to ship products, but they're using proof of authority chains as a side chain to mainnet. And it's a great sort of hack and great solution for this medium term, but that's a slippery slope, you know? Like, that's an antithesis of what we're trying to do, you know? Like, decentralization at the terminal layer is fundamentally important, because as soon as you start bringing any centralized aspects into that, you bring back corruption, you bring back everything else that, it's like, why even have this in the first place? Just use a MySQL database and, you know, web service. Anyway. I think the other aspect is craftsmanship is really important, and caring about the actual software and how we build these things. Andre is going to have a great talk in terms of design and layering this sort of approach. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but it's not just about getting data from users and then trying to make it better. It's about understanding the fundamental principles behind it and figuring out how we can marry that with a user experience that people understand and know. And that's an incredibly difficult problem. And you won't, like, even though like user tests are very important and like they are a very good guiding rod, it's important we don't let marketing kind of drive things. It's very important that comes from us and we show people what they want. You know, what was the whole car and horse thing? Like, people wanted a faster horse when, anyway. Oh yeah, I touched on this already. Yeah, so like, this is also a very hard thing to find a balance of. On one side of things, we want to make sure that the end user has at least the access or right to choose how they interact with things. And convenience really takes away some of those rights in certain ways to make it more convenient for the end user. And these are things like default positions or default values. But it's really, and there's a security model there as well that is also incredibly inconvenient when done correctly. So how we find the exact balance between those is well, it's not my job anymore, which is great. It's all you talented people, but it's certainly something that's hard to get right. And I think we need to inform the user, if we are making things convenient for them, what those trade-offs are, or at least we need to have a very clear understanding of what those are. And should the user want to dive deeper or get into the sort of under the hood, so to speak, they should be able to do that. We shouldn't be taking away their rights. Johnny and Ali have been doing a great job in terms of trying to figure out how we position status. they don't like this idea anymore, but I do. So I think, we've had very confusing messaging, like, are we a dApp browser? Are we a messenger? Or are we wallets? What is all these things? Like, we're juggling a lot of concepts. This idea of status being a new class of app, a super app, which kind of ties back to the sort of operating system sort of stuff, where it's like status is a window or a platform that is running on top of the blockchain, but it acts as an interface to all these different things. So it becomes less about the features that we offer, and it's more about what you can actually do in a crypto life or do through status. Which leads me to my next point, is about how we can start supporting the ecosystem and creating new systems like ride sharing or house sharing or food delivery, so markets and services, or just like restaurant menus and practical things that you want to do in your daily life, but you can't actually do it through crypto right now. We want to start building helping support the community to build these things out, or at least build out the smart contracts as a common good for other people to start working on. We also want to start doing incubation sites, and there's going to be talks about this in more detail, but incubation sites and helping to actually create a really interesting environment for other dApp developers and other people in the ecosystem to really move Ethereum forward. So, we talked. I talked about smart cities and IoT and that sort of thing. And at the moment, none of the implementations of Ethereum have had a really strong focus on how to do this on very resource-restricted devices. Like, for example, if we wanted to embed Ethereum or smart contracts into public transportation or a turnstile, that's a very difficult thing to do. It's definitely very resource inefficient. So we'll be working on an Ethereum 2.0 sharding client called Nimbus that has this sort of overarching goal. And it'll be promising all of the Ethereum 2.0 things. So moving to the WebAssembly virtual machine, which is great because you can get rid of precompiles. It'll use stateless clients, hopefully. It'll be using sharding. All these really cool things. So yeah, keep an eye on that. Oh, wait. The Booker status is, well, we've got the wiki, right? But I don't think we really use it too often, and it's a little overwhelming. But we do use Google Docs a lot. So I don't know if this is going to be an alternative to the wiki or if it's going to be just something about our story. But the idea behind the Booker status is that we generate on a daily basis an ODF file which just contains all of our documents. The idea is it'll be like a one-stop shop if you ever need to know anything about our knowledge base or our stories. You can just come here and check it out. So I really want to encourage everyone to write down their life experience or world experience or your story and help share that, because I mean, like, our story is a collective story, and we're all involved in this. So anyway, and if you've got knowledge about status, or like there's something that people should know or at least be aware of in the future, it's good to write that down. So I encourage everyone to participate in that. Anyway, I'm nearly done. So thank you for listening to me so far. But one last rant, and this is the Cypherpunk manifesto. Just another sort of inspirational piece. It's also emotionally charged as well, right? So let's see how it goes. Eric Hughes is one of the three guys that kind of started this whole thing. Okay, so privacy is necessary for an open society in an electronic age. Privacy is not secrecy. A private matter is something one doesn't want the whole world to know, but a secret is a matter of something one doesn't want anyone to know. Privacy is the power to selectively reveal oneself to the world. If two parties have some sort of dealing, then each has a memory of their interaction. Each party can speak about their own memory of this. How could anyone prevent it? One could pass laws against it, but the freedom of speech, even more than privacy, is fundamental to an open society. We seek not to restrict any speech at all, and if many parties speak together on the same forum, each can speak to all others and aggregate together knowledge about individuals and other parties. The power of electronic communications has enabled such group speech, and it will not go away merely because we might want it to. Since we desire privacy, we must ensure that each party of transaction have knowledge only which is directly necessary to that transaction. Since any information can be spoken of, we must ensure that we reveal as little as possible. In most cases, personal identity is not salient. When I purchase a magazine at a store and hand cash to the clerk, there is no need to know who I am. When I ask for an electronic mail provider to send and receive messages, my provider need not know to whom I am speaking or what I am saying and what others are saying to me. My provider only need know how to get the message there and how much I owe them in fees. When my identity is revealed by the underlying mechanism of the transaction, I have no privacy. I cannot here selectively reveal myself. I must always reveal myself. Therefore, privacy in an open society requires anonymous transaction systems. Until now, cash has been the primary such system. An anonymous transaction is not a secret transaction system. An anonymous system empowers individuals to reveal their identity when desired, and only when desired. This is the essence of privacy. Privacy in an open society also requires cryptography. If I say something, I want it heard only by those whom I intend it. If the content of my speech is available to the world, I have no privacy. To encrypt is to indicate the desire for privacy, and to encrypt with weak cryptography is to indicate not too much desire for that privacy. Furthermore, to reveal one's identity with assurance when the default anonymity requires a cryptography signature. We cannot expect governments, corporations, or other large faceless organizations to grant us privacy out of their own benefits. It is to their advantage to speak of us, and we should expect that they will speak. To try and prevent their speech is to fight against the realities of information. Information does not just want to be free, it longs to be free. Information expands to fill the available storage space. Information is rumor's younger, stronger cousin. Information is fleeter of foot, has more eyes, knows more, and understands less than rumor. We must defend our own privacy if we expect to have any. We must come together and create systems which allow anonymous transactions to take place. People have been defending their own privacy for centuries with whispers, darkness, envelopes, closed doors, secret handshakes, and careers. The technologies of the past did not allow for strong privacies, but electronic technologies do. We, the cypherpunks, are dedicated to building anonymous systems. We are defending our privacy with cryptography, with anonymous mail forwarding systems, and digital signatures, and with electronic money. Cypherpunks write code. We know that someone has to write the software to defend privacy, and since we can't get the privacy unless we all do, we're going to write it. We publish our code so that our fellow cypherpunks may practice and play with it. Our code is free for all of us to use worldwide. We don't much care if you don't approve of the software that we write. We know that our software can't be destroyed and that a widely dispersed system can't be shut down. Cypherpunks deplore regulations on cryptography, for encryption is fundamentally a private act. The act of encryption, in fact, removes information from the public realm. Even laws against cryptography reach only as far as the nation's border and the arms of its violence. Cryptography is ineluctably spread across the whole globe, and with its anonymous transaction systems, that makes it possible. For privacy to be widespread, it must be part of a social contract. People must come together and deploy these systems for the common good. That's us. Privacy only extends so far as cooperation of one's fellows in society. We, the cypherpunks, seek your questions and your concerns and hope we may engage you so that we do not deceive ourselves. We will not, however, be moved out of our course because some may disagree with our goals. The cypherpunks are actively engaged in making the network safer for privacy. Let us proceed together in space. Onward. again, that's 2 decades ago. These guys are getting old. It's kind of our turn to pick up these ideas and carry them forward for the next generation. So I hope you'll pick it up with me. And that's just some books that they're interesting to read. Swarmwise stuff is kind of really inspirational for organization stuff. I mean, there's plenty more books. I'll give them to you later if you want. Cryptoanarchy in cyberstates and power utopias. It's getting a bit dated now, but the general idea is kind of fascinating. Machinery freedom is like how we can design very similar systems we have today, but more from a libertarian style of doing so, which is kind of interesting. The sovereign individual is, they're all interesting, but the sovereign individual kind of talks about the progression of sort of, I actually can't read it now, I'm such these days. And I just started reading this other book on the plane here, Making the Social World, the Structure of Human Civilization, and that's really, really fascinating. Whatever I was just talking about. But the reason why this Making the Social World is, at least I'm finding it fascinating so far into my reading, is that it's trying to map how we get from sort of subjective opinions and bring them into sort of objective statements that we collectively all agree upon. So it's really about encoding human social ontologies and then how we build institutions or statements about that, which we can then use as rules that scale beyond our small villages. So it's more of a philosophical book, but it's super fascinating, and I think it will probably help structure the way we design smart contracts in the future as well. So yeah, all right, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jarrad. That was great to listen to. Yeah, the whole history. I won't try and summarize it. I think now we'll take a slight shift in gears, and we're going to have 3 presentations on kind of working remote. We have Stefania here, who I guess you'll give a quick background on. Yeah. We'll have Hester give a presentation on user research and the importance of being user-centric, as well as Yessin, who will discuss the government, financial, regulatory aspects of kind of how status functions and operates, I think. All right. Please welcome Stefania.
Hi. Good morning. I'm Stefania, and I just started in people operations here 2 weeks ago. So I wanted to talk a little bit about companies that are working fully remotely and how they operate generally, because I had a few chats and I noticed that several people were like, yeah, but we are remote, so everything is different, and we don't know really how we should be doing this thing. I worked for a fully distributed company already for a couple of years. So this is a bit of a run-through of how things work. And we are not alone. These are all companies that have been distributed from day one. And amongst the people in people operations within these companies, because things are a little bit peculiar, we are trying to network as much as possible, and we do share best practices, experiences, successes, failures, and what to do next. So first, let's talk about what's working. So for remote workers, the first thing that comes to mind is like the Instagram picture of the digital nomad poetically lying on a beach with his laptop and being totally free and this new thing, right? It's not just that. I mean, it's for most people, really, it's like being parents and having the time to take your kids to school or to play with them when they come home, being able to fix your schedule and to accommodate what you want to do with being able to do your best work. So the underlying thing is also trust. Companies that work fully remotely trust people to do their job. There's nobody looking over your shoulder. You need to be very independent and self-motivated, And you need to be able to just go and get things done, but also to ask for help when it's needed. Autonomy in the sense of being able to have your space and reach your goals. And companies that work remotely also really help us creating an environment of mastery in the sense of shared learning. People are encouraged to buy books, to follow courses, to go to conferences, to share their learnings with others through workshops, for example, like virtual workshops, where everyone can, if you're an expert about something, you can share it with the rest of the organization on like a weekly or monthly basis. There are sessions, and everybody can learn about that. And the main thing is the sense of purpose. Companies tend to have a vision on something bigger than the product that they are marketing, so that everyone is working towards a better future or a better world, the place where we want to be. And that vision is what propels the efforts of everybody together. And also, remote companies have an advantage about diversity, because you can recruit people wherever they are in the world, which also means that you're not restricted to the pool of people that are close to your tech hub, or you're not asking people to relocate and move everything they have. But also, there are a lot of really good people that just don't want to be in an office because of social anxiety or anything else. And so being in a remote company allows also these people to work and do their best without having to be part of office politics and other settings that they don't want to be in. Now, it's not all glory. There's a lot of things that are a little bit challenging. So when you're hiring for remote positions, you need to be looking at a completely new skill set that it's not common to test for and that nobody was looking for up to 10 years ago. You need to have these people that are super self-motivated, that are able to communicate in writing, which is very different from communicating in person. You have people that are excellent and charismatic speakers, but then when they are communicating only on Slack, are incredibly dry, and you don't understand anything of what they say. You need to ask them 10 questions, which it's not ideal, especially if the communication is asynchronous, because it can take you a day to gather up like an information that in an office would take 10 seconds. Gets costly. Also, for the remote team member, isolation becomes a thing. It's like you and your laptop every day. Sometimes, I mean, if you don't pay attention to it, you risk to stay in your bedroom for a week. That's not great. Well, depends. And also another thing that tends to happen and that I talked with a lot of people about is insecurity. Because you're alone, you don't see your colleagues, you don't get all these contextual clues or smiles or little things, body language, so you have no idea where you stand. And many people develop a sense of what's called the imposter syndrome, which means that you think that you were hired by mistake because somehow they also thought you were great, but you're not. And everyone actually hates you, and one of those days you're going to be let go just because you're not as good as the others. There's nothing to do about that. Another big risk is burnout, especially if you're passionate about what you do. It's very hard to stop when you're just home at your laptop, and there's always someone online to talk to and to keep working with you. You don't see anybody going home and doing something else. So it's another type. I mean, you need also to self-motivate yourself and be very rational about taking breaks and stopping. And then one thing that we could talk about for that would be enough for an entire day of sessions, tools and processes. How do you create the same environment that would happen in an office, but virtually? So how do you keep everyone up to date? Where do people go and look for information in a very easy and consumable way? How do you do your daily stand-ups? How do you share company news? What's the most efficient way to brainstorm? That's like a lot of work, especially for people that do what I do. So this is not really bad. Let's call it the fun problems to solve, because they are. And things that have been done so far, for example, in hiring, we tend, instead of looking at just plain interviews as it used to be, there's a trend to develop tests or to have candidates do a trial project with a company before hiring. The sense of the trial project is that you actually work on a real problem with the real team that you will be working with, and you have access to the same tools, pretty much. Maybe not super critical information, but it allows to test, to see how people react to remote. It allows to see how they communicate in writing. And it doesn't really mean that they need to be excellent at the moment that they start the project. But it's important because you can see how they think and if they're open to like re-challenge themselves and learn something new. So it's not just about having a very good result in the project, but it's more about, can this person learn to work with us? Then with isolation, another thing that remote companies do is to create specific channels where people can talk about what they're feeling, or buddying projects. So you have a sign up, you've been around for a while, somebody else is new, you are teaming up with this person for the first month, you chat once a week about what is going on, or other initiatives like book clubs, or days of the week where everyone is having a coffee together, the virtual lunch on Zoom, or things like that. About insecurity, this is really something that especially people leads deal with a lot. So it's good in a remote environment to have very frequent one-on-ones with every team member. Talk about how they're feeling, like make sure that you give enough feedback. Make sure that you leave room for questions and that they have a clear sense of where they're standing. And if you see something that they could be doing better, just say it so that they know. Don't let people wonder. That's the main thing. Don't let people alone and wonder. For burnout, the best practices are to be very mindful and encouraging of taking time off. I mean, realize that taking time off is really important. You're not going to be able to do excellent work forever unless you chill a little bit sometimes. And managing notifications is also important. When it's nighttime, when you need to sleep, just switch off Slack. Or use the do not disturb function so that people only pings you. You get the ping only if it's really important. But try not to have all the notifications on all the time because it's going to kill you at some point. It's not okay. Really not okay. And with tools and processes, again, that depends. Every team finds what works for them. It's good to be acceptant of the fact that it's trial and error all the time. So let's try something, does this work? If it document it properly so that the other teams within the organization don't go through the same mistakes. Because that's the most important thing. Document what works, tweak it all the time so that it works better and make sure everyone knows about it. Okay, then this on the logistics, but then there is something else which is underlying, which is more important and that keeps everything together, especially when you're going remote. Culture. The culture is the system of underlying values and ideas that keep everything together. And this shared system of values is also what helps everyone making decisions on a daily basis. And especially when you're working remotely, you need to have a very explicit set of values that help you guide in things. And everyone needs to be aware of that, which is great because Jarrad talked about that just earlier. So to give you an example, Buffer is a company that has been also distributed from day one. And one thing that they do great is blogging about their successes and their failures and what works and what not. So there's plentiful of material in there. The Buffer values, simplified, are like that. So it's quite a few simple statements, and this way they even look a little bit wishy-washy, like, yeah, we're great and stuff. But then they go deeper, and to give you an example, when they talk about communicating with clarity, this is what they say in specific, and how that can help guiding the work of people. So this is a very limited set of examples. It doesn't mean that communication with clarity only applies to this, but this helps everyone in every role having a moment to sit and think on how that applies to that role. and create their own set of, guiding ideas on how they're going to be working. And you can do this for product, for prioritization. You can do this pretty much for everything, knowing that the choices you make will be in line with what the organization stands for. And that helps massively because it allows you to lead really by principle rather than setting a lot of rules. Once you know what the principles are and how they apply to your work, you don't really need to have a lot of policies around that. And people are trusted to do the best for the company and work as adults. Okay, Automatic does something similar. Also, Automatic is distributed completely. This is the set of values of Automatic, and this is included in every contract that people sign. So when you get hired, before you put your signature, you get this, and you sign this really, more even the legal part of the contract. So what happens there is that team leads are encouraged to go through these things during their one-on-ones on a regular basis so that they can give feedback and support people on all these aspects. So what can you do to learn better? What is it that you need to do in terms of communication? Are you being friendly enough? Who could you help? What are the other projects that you could take on? So it's not just an abstract thing. It's something that is really done on a day-to-day basis. And this is what I was saying before. This is one of the founders of Buffer, and I think it represents very well what remote companies want to be doing. Then, on a bit more of a theoretical, TopTal has published this. So this is a model that existed before to explain how company culture works in general. And this is a thing that everyone agrees upon. Company culture is already there. It's not born the day that somebody sits at a table and shuts out 10 pretty sentences. It's born the day within the company when the very first few employees sit together around an idea, and then the next few employees will also be part of that. But because you risk to lose that in the growth when you're starting to get really, really, really busy, it needs to be made explicit. And the green edits are what TopTal did, and they're really specific to remote work and how it changes because of the lack of physical context and co-location. You need to be more explicit, and you need to have more of the communication around it. So yeah, I think that was what I wanted to cover right now. It's like just a very quick overview, so thanks. And if anybody wants to talk more about that or work cross projects together, just reach out. I'd love to do that. Thanks.
I think we're getting. Next we have Hester, who's going to be talking to us about users and user research. There's props. In terms of logistics, we'll keep going with the two more, and then we'll just extend the coffee break till whenever. Yeah. Oh, you need this one.
Yeah. All right. Everybody's still awake? I'm up here and I'm nervous, and even I feel sleepy. So I understand if you need to stretch or do whatever you need to, stick with us for, I don't know, maybe 20 more minutes. I feel a lot more comfortable having met everybody, or almost everybody, over the last 2 days. I want to tell you a bit more about UX research, user experience research. I talked a little bit about it during the town hall in January, but that's been a while, and by now I actually have a little bit more to say to you because we've actually been running testing. So that's what I want to talk about bursting bubbles, hence the balloons. Hold the thought, I'll come back to that later. But I want to start by referring to the story of Juicero, which, okay, maybe some of you know. I hope you do. Juicero is a company that doesn't exist anymore, that had the wonderful idea of bringing fresh food into people's homes and helping them make fresh juice. Very nice. I don't think anyone would disagree with that being something that we want, as it helps us live healthy and longer. They received, I believe it was $120 million in funding. They were backed by Google, and they seemed to be on a really strong track, building this high-tech machine to squeeze your juice until maybe 2 years later, Bloomberg posted a video showing that you could actually just do that by hand. And that meant that their company basically went down the drain in spite of all the support and the funding that they had initially. Now, for sure, we are not Juicero. Juicero has been compared to or described as having been in a Silicon Valley bubble, having been so caught up in their own story that they didn't see the outside world anymore and thought this was actually going to work. Well, actually, you could squeeze a bag by hand. Now, we are a remote company. We are very diverse, if I look around. That means that initially you would think that we have a lot of different minds pulled together that will keep us in check and keep us suspicious of what we're doing, which I think is a very healthy attitude. Then again, if I think back of walking into the lobby on Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon it was still quite easy to figure out, oh, this is probably someone of status. Probably that one too. Maybe this one too. So how different are we really? Also for us, it's very easy to get into a bubble and to have assumptions about who might use our app, what people need, what they expect from us, what they understand. I think we have some bias towards people understand a signing phrase and a seed phrase and gas limits and gas prices and everything that comes with what we're building. We don't want those assumptions to blow up in our face because they are our assumptions. And if we talk about the state of us goes beyond this room and goes beyond the community, the wider community, and we need to think about what everybody else might expect and understand and want and need. This is why we do UX research. So this is basically the purpose of UX research, to keep bursting those bubbles and to keep checking our assumptions and what we're doing. We can do that in a number of ways. There's a lot of methodologies out there that I don't want to bore you with, but basically it comes down to methods that relate to how many people think like this, act like this, want this, how much messages do people send, for example. So we can think in quantity, or we can think in why, qualitatively, why does this happen, and find clues as to how to fix certain issues. So that's one way to distinguish different methods. Moving ahead a little. Another one is to distinguish based on what people say. Should we ask people for what they want, as in, do they want a car or do they want a faster horse? And what people do. Should we be monitoring them, which is a very tricky issue in our space because we don't actually want to track people, but we do want to see what they do. Now we do go here. One example is something we did recently, end of February in Berlin, where we met with Tom and Doug, not their real names, but they really were. a 25-year-old industrial psychology student, and a 41-year-old DJ and music producer. No crypto techies, but they were invested in cryptocurrency, they owned cryptocurrency, and they were somewhat familiar with the terminology, not with status. We invited them to look at a prototype we built, kudos to the design team, to walk through this prototype together to try and set up the app and start exchanging messages to see to what extent they understood what we were trying to get them to do in the app, and to see to what extent it fitted with their expectations. Now this is what that looks like. Here you can see Dennis. Here you can see Eric. Berlin folks, because this was all in person. And in the background you can see an interview room through a one-way mirror. So this is how we observed two participants trying to get acquainted to status as an app in this case, and to set it up. Now, balloons. Yeah, balloons, where are they? Okay. We had some assumptions that we tested in these sessions with Tom and Doug, but also with 6 other people in 3 other pairs. And I want to walk through like which of those actually turned out to be true and which of those actually turned out to not be true. So number 5, who has balloon number 5? Did it drop anywhere? Is it? All right, number 5. The app is too simplistic or empty. So this has been a conversation. There's no easy answer to all of this, by the way. There's no, like, oh, now we busted it. These were 8 people. They're not everyone. There were 8 people in Berlin. But the app is too simplistic or empty. I would say we burst that one. So if you want to go ahead, you can pop it with whatever you have available. Maybe you can, like, I don't know, jump on it, squash it. Because what we found was people say that they actually like the clarity of an empty screen that inspires them to action. That's not to say that that's because of that they would understand it better. That's to say that they like the clarity. So if we really want to know what works best, then we need to observe their behavior and see if they actually start using the app more or start using more functionality. Or, okay, moving on. Number 8. I'm going quite random here. Number 8. All right. I would want to let you read my notes, but I don't think they're readable. So, what's your name, by the way?
Yeah,
We haven't met. Yeah. Okay. S&T and Ether, it's not real money. That was one of my assumptions for sure. Cryptocurrency is different. In this case, you can also burst it. You wouldn't burst it. Why?
Okay, like I think there is like enough information, like people are already so like vested in and like informed that it's like it's a little bit outdated though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's
It's so different that you can't compare it to real money. Is that it?
yeah, like I don't think it's like the question is about like if the people think it's like not the real money, like it's not usable or like it doesn't have value or like.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't burst the bubble.
I think I hear what you're saying, because it depends on the perspective. How are we looking at cryptocurrency? In this case, I'm saying burst because of the number of people that asked, is there some kind of converter in this? Is there any way for me to see how much money I should be transferring? And this is not for the case that you actually want to transact assets, but this is for the day-to-day case of wanting to pay someone for coffee. And in that sense, people do tend to think still in the currency that they know. But you can deflate it, maybe. If you're not sure, Yeah, we can deflate bubbles as well because they become less important. We might have some that we think are big topics and we really need to make sure that we get them right, and we might have small ones that maybe we need a little bit more investigation, but it can wait.
I'm kind of curious how people think about bot, right? Like I think it's probably their first time using bot.
Yeah.
So very, very similar sort of mentality, right?
I think I might need to get back to that in half a year from now. Because bot is, at the moment, still a little bit difficult to test without a real working version of it. And we're actually, I mean, it works, but we're testing with a prototype. So we need a functional prototype to do that. But let me come back to you in a few minutes as well. Yeah. Jarrad was saying, curious about bots.
Oh, like Thai baht, right? Like the money that we're having to operate in Thailand.
Oh, bots. Sorry, I totally misheard you as well. I thought the bot, like the messaging
I
bot.
think
Okay.
it's a very similar sort of mental process, you know, like using F or S and T. It's kind of like a very foreign means of transfer of value, right? So I mean, Thai baht is a little different because you know you can actually use it on the street, but so you can learn how to get a sense of what it is. But I think for everyone here today who's not familiar with it, doesn't have a very good mental model of its monetary value. Maybe that's a very simple
Yeah,
concept.
yeah. It's going to take more time for people to get used to it and have an intrinsic value to it. Yeah, yeah. Number 3. Yeah. All right. Decentralization makes people feel safe, which was actually a very interesting response. What do you think? Good guess. 50%, yes. I mean, again, it's not that black and white, but what we found during this testing was that decentralization actually made someone feel very unsafe until we explained it. And that had to do, I think, with the concept of decentralization just not being that well known. So decentralization is one thing, but it's difficult to relate to. Privacy is something we might be able to relate to, and security as well. So that fact that we achieved that decentralization doesn't necessarily make people feel safe, because your data is everywhere, and unless you know that it brings you privacy security, you feel safe. So burst it or deflate it? I would burst it, but I'll leave it up to you. All right, which one have we? Number 2. Our users know dApps. Does everybody here know dApps? So actually what happened was that a number of people said, dApps, what are those? When they were using the app. These are people who, again, owned cryptocurrency, are known to some of the concept of blockchains, but are maybe a little bit more on the investor side of things, just had never heard of dApps. So as soon as we use dApps as a terminology, it can be confusing. I say burst it, but again, think about it. All right, okay. Number 1. Patrick, hi. You're going to help me burst more bubbles, right, in the future, as our new researcher. All right, people will know the difference between signing phrase and seed phrase. Actually, this is your day. No, you start on Monday, actually. Did you get the difference between a signing phrase and a seed phrase? All right. Very representative. Actually, there's a few layers to it, but what we noticed was that people mistook the signing phrase for the seed phrase. So they actually believed that they had already covered the seed phrase and sometimes even written it down. And that's a security issue. Well, not necessarily. It's a backup issue. Because if you feel safe and you feel like you've done your backup and you're good to go, then you're not going to take action. You're not going to look for the seed phrase to back it up if you've already done that. Part of it is they look the same. At an abstract level, they're all words, 3 words or 12 words, but they're words and they look the same. All right. I think we're almost there. Which balloons do we have still? Number 4? Anywhere? Status is awesome. What do you think? I would say we keep that one. My opinion. I don't know what everybody else feels. Okay, sorry. Assumption status is awesome. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Let's just do one more also in the interest of time. Number 9. Anywhere? Yes. The context code and the wallet address might be confusing. What do you think? Okay. Fair enough. We actually figured, design team figured, it might be confusing and actually thought to give them different colors to distinguish. Anything wallet related is blue and the contact code is white. So they look the same, but they have a different color background. That we can keep because it actually was confusing in spite of those colors. Yeah, basically the use of different colors works, but not enough because the code still looks similar. And actually similar to signing phrase and seed phrase, when looking at the context code, it already felt like you had your wallet address. So why do we have both?
It's a legacy reason. We don't actually need it both. But we can use both. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah,
thanks for clearing that up. I think that would be a big improvement because it seems very confusing right now. Yeah. So you say burst it now? No. We can, okay. Okay, we burst it. So here's the thing. I spread the balloons around the room because this is not just a UX research activity. This is something, and I think that's why it's very healthy to be suspicious, that we all should be doing. We all should be thinking about what assumptions do we have, and we all should be addressing it to each other when we are meeting or when we are having a conversation on Slack, as in, hey, I think you're assuming something, maybe we should test this. Then what I can do, what Patrick can do, is figure out what is the best way to test this. Do we need a lot of people? Do we need one person? Do we need to understand why people are doing something or how common the problem is? So with that, I want to leave you with, I gotta scroll through these. These are actually all the ones that we addressed. No? How do I switch this on? There we go. I kind of want to leave you with a video, but I don't know how. Don't judge my video editing skills. We are running testing today. First session at 1:30, which is during lunch. Ricardo, where are you? Is kind enough to facilitate so that, if we find a room and if we figure out like how to set up the logistics, you can observe the sessions remotely. We'll be in a different building, but there's 3 people coming in to test the latest build of the app. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yessin, and the title of my presentation is Regulation and Tax. Although I will be mostly talking about flowers this morning. Can you do the next slide, please? All right, and not specific flowers, actually, tulips, the tulip mania. And so crypto people don't like that the recent rise in crypto prices is being compared to the tulip mania. Mainly because the tulip mania in 1636 started somewhat in November, and 4 months later it burst, and that was it. Whereas crypto is actually, since about 9 years, it's since Bitcoin was invented, the prices raise, then somewhat collapse, stabilize, raise, somewhat stabilize, raise. So it's going on since 9 years, and an event which just took 4 months is, and then completely collapsed. That's not a good example. I think it's actually a good example because before the tulip mania, tulips were hardly available throughout the world. And after the tulip mania, basically now, you can find tulips in every single flower store, so we have worldwide adoption, mass adoption. Moreover, tulips have a stable price nowadays, so hardly any volatility, very desirable, as well as the market. And think about the market cap of all tulips bulbs together. I mean, it's been the highest ever currently. So, I mean, great thing, a good case for a mania. But now think back to the year 1636. On one hand, there were tulip farmers, and let's think about Amsterdam. Anna has a great shirt on today. So in Amsterdam, 1636, you had farmers, they made a living of that, and people just loved them because they were selling tulips, everybody wanted tulips. On the other hand, there were businessmen which thought, oh, that's an interesting phenomenon. I could do tourist exchange, tulips derivatives. I could do tulip lending, and so do a whole business around it. And also, so financialize tulips to some extent. And people in Amsterdam would like them too, because they would like to participate in the tulip mania. But when the bubble burst, you know, the farmer is probably still getting pretty well away with things. People continue buying tulips, they enjoy tulips, but the businessman who made like a bubble and pump and dump out of it, he's really not the person people like, and people will call for regulation. And the government actually stepped in at the tulip mania, forbid that type of tulip gambling, as well as people who lost their wealth were not protected really by that by the government because they considered that gambling, and so yeah, big problem. And now regulation typically wants to do two things. It's protection of the system, financial system stability, and on the other hand, protection of investors and creditors so that they don't lose their money. And regulators are actually a really good thing. They are part of a functioning democracy, protecting the system stability as well as investor funds. And so when we are in crypto, we need to decide, depending on what type of project which we do we want to be the farmer type of and focus on doing great code, or do we want to use crypto and do a financial business out of it? And if we decide for a financial business, which also provides value, a functioning financial system is important for the economy, but then we are subject to regulation. That's how the laws are and how the system works in order to protect stability of the system and investors. And now crypto can provide an additional, like on the farming side more, an interesting aspect. It's sort of programmed regulation. And I encourage research in a way that crypto can protect investor funds and provide for system stability, and thus not requiring a central regulator anymore. And we are not there yet, but that's a way to go. So with regards to tax, next slide. So this is a nice city, actually the one which we're in. And everybody enjoys safety, cleanness, a functioning infrastructure. And the government or city government takes care of that, but that needs some sort of financing. And for that, tax is in place. It's not a smart contract, it's a social contract that people pay their taxes in the jurisdiction or the area where they live in order to finance safety, cleanliness, functioning infrastructure. And those I encourage, take part in that, pay your taxes. Don't think just because in crypto and it's something in the virtual world, it doesn't apply to you. When you make a wealth, when you have income in crypto, really comply. But that doesn't mean you can't optimize. Of course, optimize like everybody else in that tax system, optimize, but think about it and comply. So, I have a trick to crypto adoption. During the last 4 years or so, I was totally excited about crypto, and I still am. And so I tried to, already 4 years ago, I tried to convince my friends that this is a great thing, that this will open your mind, fall into the rabbit hole, see the world with different eyes. And I was talking and talking for hours and hours, and it was difficult to motivate people to look into that topic. And then at some point, probably also watching some videos about Crypto Jesus and Roger Ver and so on, giving away free ETH and that or Bitcoin. That has really worked well. So setting up a wallet for friends and giving them just $3-5 in ETH and have them do a couple of transactions. That did the job. Basically, everybody with whom I set a wallet and just gave a bit of free crypto, they started experimenting with it and loving it immediately. And so I still have people coming back to me after years and saying, "Oh wow, it was great that you opened my eyes. I have my friends are into it too, or my kids are playing around with crypto and seeing the world with other eyes." So thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. So we have, from a logistics perspective, we are slightly behind schedule, so we'll make up for it. There's coffee, some breaks for everyone here, just outside. If we can kind of come back in here at around 11:30-ish, so about half an hour, and then we'll start with the mid-morning stuff. Awesome, thank you.
Is Ricardo going to talk? Are we going to go into the OKRs? Don't stop yet. There's one more. Schedule I'm on.
Oslo. Yeah. And then we'll and then when we stand up.
Yeah. Sounds good.
How's it going?
How's it stay?
Yes.
It's very cold.
Yeah, we just met.
Just about.
Yeah.
That's fine.
There's
I haven't seen any of the comments. Dude, that article, he didn't even, that guy didn't respond. Didn't even put a question back. He just started ripping on anyone who responded to him.
yeah. I mean, I actually don't care. I find it very funny that he's like, they deflected the question. Right. Whatever. So I mean, the other thing is that we're going to go this long enough with black culture.
Well, that's the whole thing.
We see Brady going to
But then the other people who just didn't respond, and he called them out too. Like, why is that? They just chose not to respond at all.
I mean, our response is pretty good.
If everyone could have a seat. All right, so we have a relatively, we have one more presentation before we get into the morning's planning, and then we'll aim to have lunch at around 1-ish, 1 to 1, sometime between 1 and 1:30. All right, Ricardo, who's our awesome, he actually traveled the furthest to be here, 40-something, 40-something? 30-something. Okay, so not, all right. Yeah, almost 40 hours to be here from the remote jungles, villages of Brazil. He's an incredible character. If you get a chance to kind of have a chat with him anytime in the next few days, we'll be presenting on identity.
Thank you, Nabil. So, yeah, how we said, my name is Ricardo. I'm working in smart contracts, and I will presenting the identity contract that is supposed to kind of replace multi-sigs and have new features. Maybe. Sorry. It was working right now. Thanks. So identity contract is using implementation of ERC 725 and ERS 735. This was some interface that was defined by, I forgot, Frozen Man is his Fabian is working with Slocket, I guess. He's still in Slocket, no? Oh, he's working for the foundation. Yeah, indeed, the ERC20. So the way with the architecture is that we want to have this interface so a mini wallet can understand the identity. There is the identity itself is 725 that contains the keys and it's like a multi-sig. And we also have the claim holder thing that, for example, you can set claims yourself, or other company can set some claim, or government. Anyone can set any type of claim to you as long as you accepted it. We have a factory of identities. This factory builds an instance. It's not here, but this instance points to a kernel. And then you have this logic that is upgradable. And we also have this friends recovery that in case you lose your management key, you can recover it using your friends. The management key, it allows you to modify all of the keys. You can replace or remove keys. You can change the settings, like you can the minimal approvals to do something it's separated for identity. For claims you can only do claims. But for actors and for management, you can set, you need 2 or 3 signs, and you can also update the kernel and set up the recovery. The actual key can execute in behalf of your identity. For example, you can create a key for each. It's like when you have that application that you give the application the right to execute something in behalf of your account, like you have in social medias, Twitter, Facebook, use something like this, but in this case it's in the blockchain. And the claim key, you can set some actors to able to request approval to a claim about you. This is the approval process. When you try to execute something, it will trigger an event asking there is this execution request. And then people will have to approve. Once everyone approved it, it gets automatically executed. This recovery, as friends recovery, it will allow, like if you lose your keys, to recover your identity. To set up, you need to, like user data. This is user experience might help me define the best way. But I imagine like the name, the birth date, and the cat name of the person will be fine. You select some friends you trust. This is important, but we are also trying to avoid problems with like collusion of friends. And then you initialize the identity with the recovery setup. When you need to recover, then you need to ask these friends for signing a message for you, telling, oh, this is my new manager key, and sign for me, and then you can commit to recovery. It's possible to your friends not need to pay any gas. You paid all the gas, prefer doing this. So the privacy and the security of friends recovery, it works like this. The secret saved on the public blockchain is derived from double hashing the recovery secret. This is important because we never wanted to, at the revealing action, to reveal what was the secret. We just want to give a hash that no one knows what is it. The friend lists are also secret. So the friends don't need to know they are your recovery option. And we can achieve that by hashing their addresses against that double hashed secret. The recovery secret is never revealed, as I said. It's just its hash. If the trustful friends are defined, even if the secret is discovered in case of some brute force attack or don't know what can happen, it'd be unlikely to cause issues because you trust that friends and they are not going to be bad to you. So, and also we are, it's not possible to front run this recovery process because the signed message contains all the data that is going to be used now. Also, the upgradability, it's important to be able to upgrade the identity contract because we don't know how in future things will be. So we wanted to, like, these users don't need to change their identity address, don't need to do the claims all again. Imagine, oh, now we need a new function identity, then you have to get all the claims again and do everything again. So the upgradability will help this. We are using delegate call that caused some issues with parity recovery, but I can assure that this will not happen here. You need to require a wait of 1 month to update. This is important because in case of a hacker take over your account, it will not be able to upgrade it in a way that friends recovery will not work again, like removing the recovery code. It can change anything except by the upgradability rules. These upgradability rules are defined in the instance itself and not in the identity. Identity are not aware about upgradability. It's important, must be done with care. If you upgrade to some contract that messes with the model, you can destroy all the data in your contract. Also, we're going to have this ENS subdomain registration that it's important for like, oh, academia status, my name is this. So you don't have to, oh, my academia status is 0x73, so on. So you just use the INS subdomain. Also, we will have many options to subdomain, I guess. So you can use like status im.it or my name is.it. Don't know what we're going to have. there is this thing. The address is derived from public key. So if you have the address, you don't have the public key. But if you have the public key, you can have the address. We're going to solve that by using the claims. So the identity manager can make a self-claim to itself saying, this is my public key, send messages to me using this key. The status wallet can figure out this by requesting the information from the contract. I think this is all for now in Identities. We'll be happy to get any suggestions from you to how to improve this process. If you have any questions, I'll be happy asking. And not just about Identity, but about anything in Ethereum, in Slack. Anytime you need any help, please ask me. I'll be really happy in helping you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricardo. All right, so now we'll move on to kind of the main activity for the mid-morning, which is, before we kind of dive into it, I wanted to get a little bit of context as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. So there's this thing called OKRs, and I'll give a quick, hopefully 5 to 10 minute overview